The quarterback position is one of the most important positions in all of sports. It joins only the baseball pitcher and cricket bowler as positions in which the player gets to control the ball on every play of a given game. It makes sense that an NFL team's success is largely hinged upon their quarterback play. Transcendent quarterback talents like Tom Brady, Joe Montana, and Johnny Unitas were staples with plenty of championships over the years, and there's a reason over 70% of MVP awards have been given out to quarterbacks. With that being said, a handful of teams have been able to steer their way to success with a quarterback who's not just average, but one of the league's worst. Here are the top 5 worst quarterbacks to make the playoffs and how their teams fare. I'm sure plenty of names are swirling through your head right now, from recent draft buzz such as Christian Ponder, Tim Tebow, and Kenny Pickett, to well-known Super Bowl winners such as Trent Dilfer and Brad Johnson. But while those players might not have been great, they were at least close to middle of the pack. For reference, let's look at Blake Bortles' 2017 season to gain some perspective. Bortles was widely regarded as a draft bust and is largely blamed for that Jacksonville Jaguars team being unable to make the Super Bowl. In 2017, Bortles threw for 230 yards per game for 21 passing touchdowns and 13 interceptions, with a completion percentage just north of 60%. He also ran for about 20 yards per game and punched in 2 touchdowns on the ground. Now, this is far from a good quarterback season, but you could see that even a QB like Bortles was far from the worst signal caller in the league, being merely a little below average. Take note of these numbers as we enter the top 5.
And look at this, Osweiler is benched. Tom Savage is coming into the game, and the fans here in Houston go nuts.
In 2016, the Houston Texans were a defensive juggernaut, led by linebacking coach Mike Vrabel's punishing core of Whitney Merciless, Brian Cushing, and Jadeveon Clowney. On the other side of the ball, the Texans were the 5th worst offense in football, being guided by free agent signing Brock Osweiler. Osweiler and the Texans would play just good enough to win a weak AFC South and sneak into the playoffs at 9-7, winning 8 of those contests by a possession or less. Not to sugarcoat it, Osweiler was terrible, especially by 2016 standards. He was in the bottom 4 of every passing stat in the book and had the league's 2nd worst passer rating among qualified quarterbacks. It's true he could do a little with his legs, but with less than 10 rushing yards a game, it wasn't going to make up for his putrid touchdown to interception ratio, especially with Will Fuller and Nuke Hopkins at his disposal. In the first round, the Texans were actually able to secure a wildcard win behind 4 turnovers from Raiders backup quarterback Connor Cook and surprisingly adequate play from Osweiler and the offense. They then move on to face the Brady-led Patriots in the divisional round. There, they could no longer hide Brock Osweiler.
Osweiler gets intercepted. McCourty, look at the time Osweiler has here. Dangerous across the middle, and it is intercepted by Ryan. On the middle, and intercepted. It's Harmon this time. Interception number 3 of the second half.
I have never seen this before in my life.
In 2009, first-year head coach Rex Ryan would be hired by the New York Jets, and with the news of quarterback Brett Favre's retirement shaking the Jets franchise, Ryan would get his pick of the lot in that year's draft.
Everybody's all excited because the Jets are now on the clock.
Oh boy.
And with the 5th pick in the 2009 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Mark Sanchez, quarterback, USC.
GM Mike Tannenbaum liked Sanchez's arm strength, athleticism, and ability to step up in big games. His rookie year, Sanchez would fail to acclimate to the NFL stage, posting a horrendous 12-20 touchdown to interception ratio, while completing his passes just 53% of the time. And that athleticism Jets executive liked in the draft would amount to little over 100 rushing yards on the season. It was clear Sanchez was not ready to be an NFL quarterback, but with the help of the league's best defense anchored by all-pro corner Darrelle Revis and an offensive line that sent over half of its players to a Pro Bowl, allowed running backs Thomas Jones and Sean Green to drag the Jets to an improbable 5-1 finish and a wildcard berth. In the playoffs, backup running back Sean Green would take over, having 2 consecutive games of 120 rushing yards or more, carrying the Jets' offense. And with the help of an amazing defense forcing plenty of turnovers, the Jets would advance all the way to the AFC Championship game with road wins over the 10-6 Bengals and 13-3 San Diego Chargers. Sanchez was not particularly helpful in either of the contests, but it would hardly seem to matter with the running game working as well as it did and Darrelle Revis neutralizing the opponent's pass attack. recording an interception in both games. In the AFC Championship game, the Jets would meet with Peyton Manning's Indianapolis Colts team, whose perfect season run the Jets had spoiled in Week 16 of the regular season. There, Sanchez would show that big game poise the Jets had seen in him, tossing a pair of first-half touchdowns to put the Jets up 17-6 late in the second quarter. Unfortunately, from there, Manning would be able to dice up the Jets' secondary, while Dwight Freeney and the Colts linebackers held Sean Green and the Jets' run game to under 3 yards per carry for the first time in the playoffs. Ultimately, the Jets would fight valiantly, but would eventually lose 30-17.
I'd like to introduce you to the new starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos, Case Keenum.
Unlike the rest of the QBs on this list, Broncos rookie quarterback John Elway would go on to develop into an NFL great, but that doesn't dismiss how poor California John played in 1983. Elway would start just 10 games as he'd routinely suffer minor injuries or be benched by coach Dan Reeves in favor of 8-33 starter Steve DeBerg, who would prove to be a substantially better passer than Elway despite lacking Elway's physical gifts. Even in an era of relatively poor quarterback play, Elway stood out, throwing twice as many interceptions as touchdowns, along with a league-worst 47.5% completion percentage and a 54.9 passer rating. Elway would be able to find some success on the ground, rushing for the 6th most yards per game among quarterbacks in 1983, but would only find the end zone once. Despite rookie Elway, DeBerg's 4 wins in the saddle and the last remnants of the Orange Crush defense would propel the Broncos to a 9-7 record in the final wildcard spot. In the playoffs, Elway would be benched for Steve DeBerg, and DeBerg would struggle to move the ball against the Seahawks defense. A few poorly timed Broncos turnovers would lead to short fields for Dave Craig and the Seahawks, resulting in a 17-7 score entering the fourth quarter, where Elway would see his first playoff action, throwing 10 completions on 15 attempts and capping it off with an interception in the end zone to seal a 31-7 wild card loss.
People always ask me how your arm got so strong, and I told them, they don't know what a flop jaw is.
The expansion Buccaneers were the laughingstock of the league in their first 2 seasons, as they began with an NFL record 26 straight losses. But undisturbed by media portrayals of him, eccentric head coach John McKay would insist on trusting in his so-called 5-year plan. In 1979, just a mere 2 seasons after beginning 0-26, the Buccaneers would make McKay look like a genius, winning their first 5 in a row and finishing the season 10-6 with an NFC Central championship on the back of the league's best defense, led by Hall of Fame defensive end Leroy Selman and a hodgepodge of unheralded defensive backs who combined to allow the fewest passing yards in the league. At the helm of the ship was second-year quarterback Doug Williams. Wisely, McKay's game plan wouldn't ask much of Williams, with 57% of snaps being handed off to a running back, but that didn't stop Williams from hurting the team with the snaps he was given. He'd throw 24 interceptions, 1 every 17 pass attempts, while completing a league-worst 41.8% of his passes. That's the 3rd worst completion percentage for a full-time starter in post-merger NFL history. That's not just quarterbacks who made the playoffs. That's the absolute worst, period, leading to a league-worst 52.5 passer rating. Williams is saved by his passing touchdown mark, which was in the top half, foreshadowing another future Buccaneers quarterback known for throwing lots of touchdowns and interceptions, but we'll not get into that. Williams was a somewhat gifted runner for the time, placing top half in yards and top 10 in touchdowns, which does help him a little and keeps him out of the bottom slot. But for having one of the worst passing seasons in NFL history, the creamsicle captain is a definite anomaly. The Buccaneers earned a bye in the playoffs and would face the Dick Vermeil Eagles in the divisional round. McKay would wisely use Williams as little as he could by giving running back Ricky Bell a record-breaking 38 carries and making a few designed runs for Williams in short yardage situations. Williams would be able to skate by with 1 touchdown pass and 1 interception en route to a 24-17 road victory. Despite 250-1 preseason odds of winning the Super Bowl, Tampa would host the LA Rams in the NFC Championship game. Doug Williams would be the downfall of the Bucs in the championship game, however, completing just 2 of 13 passes, both of which were behind the line of scrimmage for 12 yards and an interception to make for a rancid 7.5 passer rating. A Rams hit would mercifully pull Williams from the game just 3 plays into the second half. Rams backup quarterback Vince Ferragamo would run circles, albeit them small, around Williams, piecing together an 160-yard performance to lead the Rams to a narrow 9-0 defensive victory and reach Super Bowl 14.
The Super Bowl you will see. Number 14 on CBS, the Los Angeles Rams against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
My mom invites Tim Tebow over for dinner, and she makes her special meatloaf.
And finally, in 2005, the Chicago Bears managed to not only make the playoffs, but would earn a first-round bye with the worst quarterback in the entire league. The Bears did so via a dominant league-best defense led by all-pro linebackers Lance Briggs and Brian Urlacher, and complemented by defensive backs Charles Tillman, Nathan Basher, and Mike Brown. The offense was understandably poor, ranking 7th worst in the league, but had a 1,300-yard rusher in Thomas Jones, the other Adrian Peterson, and DK Metcalf's dad. This team had everything you need but a competent starting quarterback. Instead, they had the literal worst quarterback in the league, a 4th-round rookie out of Purdue named Kyle Orton. Orton would start a staggering 15 of 16 games for the Bears in 2005, despite being quite literally the worst quarterback in the league. He was dead last in passing yards, touchdowns, and passer rating among quarterbacks to start 10 games that season, while throwing 14 interceptions to just 9 passing touchdowns. He did not make up for it on the ground either, unlike the majority of the QBs on this list. He'd rush for just 44 yards in the season and would never score a rushing touchdown. He'd also take an average of 2 sacks a game and fumbled a staggering 12 times, losing 8 of them. What's so crazy about this team is that their offense scored only 4 more points than their defense and special teams did. If you remove just their defensive touchdowns, this is the worst scoring team in the league in 2005, and they got a bye. Despite this, the Bears defense was just so dominant, Chicago would still finish 11-5 to earn the 2 seed in a very strong NFC conference. In the divisional round, they would face John Fox's 11-5 Carolina Panthers and would bench Orton for just the 2nd time of the season for fellow rookie Rex Grossman. Grossman would hardly do any better, managing just a 54 passer rating, while Steve Smith would torch the Bears secondary with 12 catches for 218 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, while running for an additional 36 on 3 carries and a performance for the ages, which would win it for Carolina 29-21. The trend among these cases is that in order to make the playoffs with a terrible quarterback, you have to do everything else perfectly. With incredible defenses and run games, most of these teams had real championship aspirations, despite horrible play at the sport's most important position. After these playoff runs, many fans were left thinking, if they could get this far with a bad quarterback, only imagine what they could do with an average one. Well, in 2006, the Bears went with Rex Grossman full-time, and this happened.
And now we focus back on Grossman, who has all day and goes deep. Berrien down the middle, hit in stride. Touchdown Chicago, no flags. The blitz, Bears pick it up, and Grossman is going to go deep. What a play! Berrien rolls in for the touchdown.
Bear fans, your dream is reality. Begin the migration to Miami.